thing, right? Because everything's in comparison to what Minnesota was like. So we have a little bit of snow on the ground. I would say a little bit more than I'm used to for the years that we've been here in Illinois. And it's cold, but again, not in comparison.
Yeah, right.
We can handle it.
That's awesome. And Christian is here. How are you, Christian?
I'm good. How are you, Mrs. Bauman?
I'm pretty good. It is good to see you back tonight.
Good to be back.
Is Nathan going to join us too?
I believe he is on. I don't know if he is presentable.
I'm on here.
Oh, I just didn't see you. Sorry. Hi, Nathan. How was your day?
My day was pretty boring.
Pretty boring.
Just a normal day.
Were you at school today or were you at home?
I was at school.
Okay. All right. So are you still doing like the 1 day off, 1 day on, that sort of thing?
We're off on Wednesday. Like we're on the computer on Wednesday, but my family is doing 4 days a week. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay. So Wednesday off. Wonderful. Glad you were able to be in person. And I see Carl. Hi, Carl. It is good to see you. It's been a long time.
Remember Michelle, your teacher at Holy Cross? Yeah, that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She was your English teacher.
Yeah.
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 What do you remember about Holy Cross?
Okay.
Hot lunch.
Hot lunch.
That's what he remembers about middle school. And who
Very
was,
good hot lunch
who were
too.
some of your other teachers there?
Miss Travis.
Miss Travis. No, that was in Texas. Who's else in Holy Cross? Holy Cross in Fort Wayne. Well, who was your second grade teacher?
Miss Schrader.
Miss Schrader, right. I don't know if she's still there or not.
Yeah,
Mrs.
I don't
Schrader.
know. I think she probably is. Yeah.
Probably is, yeah. But
So.
good years, very good years.
Yeah.
At Holy Cross.
Yep. It was good to have Carl there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said it's good to have you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carl's got a pretty significant hearing loss, so
Okay.
it's helpful at least in a Zoom to not have masks, because you put a
Yeah.
mask on someone who has a hearing loss and it's just all over. I mean, he really
Right.
needs the verbal, it needs the, lip reading. So,
That's right.
so anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And Lauren is here. She's a teacher at up in Michigan, right? I don't know if your students will be able to come tonight or.
I know a couple are maybes, and
Mhm.
one said either tonight or tomorrow morning for sure. So,
Okay. Well,
yeah,
there
it's
you
been a
go.
busy week for them, but.
Yeah. First week back. It is always busy.
Mhm.
We have the Holz family. How are you?
Probes.
And I see Jennifer.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. And Jessica Thompson, yes?
Yes, this is the Concordia Seminary Youth Group again.
I
On
was
my-
wondering, yeah, okay. So there's like 15 people there, right? Well, it is good to see you guys back.
We enjoyed it last night. Thank you. We're excited to be here again.
Yeah, well, I am so excited you're back and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you guys are ready for questions and conversation again, especially as we get to the end. We're gonna have some time for you guys to ask questions, so. And Ellie, hi Ellie. Good to see you again. Excellent. There's a man in a green shirt. Good to see you. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started, and there may be some more people that join us, but just to let everyone know, we are going live tonight, so that those that would like to view on Facebook can do so. and we're hoping that people will interact, especially at the end. And definitely this is a presentation that's been designed for youth. So we're going to try and address some of those issues that youth face today, but also certainly the things that youth face are things that adults can face as well. So welcome to our second virtual session for our youth conference. For those of you who don't know, my name is Michelle Baumann, and I'm the director of Y for Life with Lutherans for Life. And I'm very, very excited that you are here tonight. As you know, each day this week, or Y for Life, is part of Life Week 2021. And each day we're looking at one segment of the population that is often seen as invisible, especially by the world's standards. But the theme for today is I am indispensable, okay? And I want to know from the students here, why should we spend a day talking about us individually? What do you guys think? Why spend a day talking about the fact that I am indispensable? Any ideas?
It's easy to let the world convince you that you're not indispensable and that you're just kind of another person, or that you don't matter. So I think it's important to focus on you sometimes to know that you're important.
You're absolutely right, Ellie. You're absolutely right. The truth is, probably you as Christian young people who've been raised in Christian families have probably been told, in maybe not the exact words that we're using tonight, but you've known that you are indispensable. Maybe your parents have told you, your friends, your church, hopefully all of them have conveyed to you your indispensability. But very often throughout the day, we're told the exact opposite, right? We're measured by someone or something that sets a standard, and we don't meet that standard of perfection. We don't measure up to their expectations. So what sort of measurements do youth experience? How do people measure you? I'll give you one example maybe and kind of start you off. So what about beauty? Are you measured by your attractiveness, your physical attractiveness ever? Certainly, I see a couple nods, right? Okay, what other measuring sticks are out there? What other ways do we get measured by society?
Popularity.
Definitely, popularity, good. Matthew? Any others?
The grades.
Yes. So our intellect, our grades, right? Whether or not we get our assignments done on time. Anything else?
I would say by our productivity or our contribution to society.
Absolutely. Perhaps our personality or our communication skills, or whether or not we have great athleticism, right? There are lots of measurements that we are held to. And just a show of hands, how many of us can say that we measure high in all of those categories? Yeah, if we're honest, none of us do, right? The world's measurements end up telling us or indicating how unworthy we are. But God's measurements pronounce us valuable and loved because we are handmade by Him and we are redeemed by Christ. And if you were here last night, I hope you got that message loud and clear. See, God sets these standards of perfection as only a perfect God can do. And thankfully, He also fulfills those standards. Christ met all of them, all of the requirements for perfection for you, and He bestowed them on you at a specific day. Do you guys know which day you received those gifts, where you were clothed in white and seen as perfect and holy?
When you were baptized.
You're right, Christian. Well done. When you were baptized. So that doesn't mean you know, obviously at that moment, you certainly were made indispensable, right? You were given that perfection. And because of this, you met all those standards. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will have perfect lives. You have been made perfectly indispensable. But despite your, I guess maybe not despite, but even as you are perfectly indispensable, you will have areas of struggle, right? What it does mean, though, even though we struggle, even though we may not be seen as perfect by the world, what it does mean is that even in our weaknesses, even in our frailties, the things that the world would call imperfect, God is at work. And tonight, our panel discussion is going to talk about those issues. I hope that this panel discussion will give you an opportunity to see how you face these things if they occur to you. Or maybe they're not occurring to you right now, but will be in the future. Or maybe in the future, you will have the privilege of helping someone else face some of these life issues. And as is true of every life issue, I hope you see by the end of our session tonight, how God redeems our brokenness and even how he can use it to bless us and bless the world through us. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and invite our panel to introduce themselves. They're going to tell you who they are and give a brief description of the life issue that they face. So Pat, you want to start us off?
Okay, well, I'm Pat Nuffer. I'm a deaconess with the LCMS. I'm also a home educator and a Bible teacher currently. And that's why you see this background. If you're confused as to why it doesn't look like my laundry room where my computer is because I'm teaching the book of Esther. So this is the background. I'm here with our third child. Queen Vashti. I know you love Queen Vashti. He loves the story of Esther. But this is our son, Carl. Carl is, how old are you, Carl? Tell him. He's 39 years old, born in Texas, born very prematurely, and had sort of a rocky start, 109 days in the hospital, but has an incredible story from the Lord about his birth that changed the course of our life. He has an older brother and a sister, and he also has a younger brother. So the youngest in our family, so 3 boys and a girl. And we live in Traverse City, Michigan, which is a very northern part of Michigan. So we are having a mild winter actually, but lots of snow and a long winter. But we love it. It's beautiful. We've got icebergs. We live right on the bay. So we have these wonderful icebergs floating by right now because our bay is not frozen over. And Carl is about ready. He's going to be starting a job at a local fitness center of a Grand Traverse resort. He also volunteers at the Salvation Army. And we're just completing a house where he will move in with a housemate. And that's what he's used to in Fort Wayne, where we used to live. He lived in his own house. What did you call yourself? What were you about your house? You were the what? Yeah. Man of the house, right? Yes, he loves that term. He was the man of the house. And so we're recreating that for him to be able to age in place and live there in that house for the rest of his life.
Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Amy, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, friends. It's good to be on here tonight with you guys. My name is Amy Skogerboe, and I am a pastor's wife from just outside of Chicago, Illinois. And I am a really proud 5-boy mom. I say that and everybody usually goes with a God bless you at that point. But you know what? I think I'm maybe possibly the luckiest woman alive. I've got it good. And I've got 5 incredible guys that I've been able to spend the majority of my life with. I am also a foster mama right now. and I have a just 2-year-old little boy and a just 1-year-old little girl. And I had the privilege of being involved in her birth. So she's been with me this entire year of her life, and her older brother has been too. So what issue do I represent, so to speak? And even just asking that question, I think there's probably 100 issues that I represent. But the one that I'm a little bit of a poster child for, I don't know that you'd ever choose to be a poster child for something, but the issue that I have done some speaking on, and that I've realized that God has a intent for in my life, something that he allowed in my life purposefully to craft what I speak about, what I'm passionate about, what I care about. And that is the issue of depression and anxiety. And statistics would say that even as I say that, those of you that are listening, there's got to be a good 85% of those of you listening right now that feel a little bit of a gut check, like either you know that applies to you, or you suspect it might apply to you, or you know somebody and love somebody that you absolutely know that it applies to. It is prolific in our culture and in our human condition, this element, and it's different in everybody's lives. So even as I talk about my experience and share some of that tonight, I want to acknowledge right now that I fully get that the spectrum of depression is vast. And all the things that I say may not apply to you. You might very quickly say that's not my experience, or that really is my experience, or wow, I hope that's not my experience. But just know again that in our individuality, even in the area of depression, God has uniquely crafted it for his purposes in our life differently, even amongst those of us who suffer from it. So I'm excited to be able to kind of delve into that tonight. And I've got friends just covering it in prayer because it's such a personal topic. And I realize that's true of the other speakers that are on here tonight too, that we've got good prayer coverage, because anytime we talk about the deepest areas of our lives that God is working very powerfully in, the enemy has an agenda for that part of our life as well. So we got the battle going on, and over even these discussions tonight. Youth, you have a bullseye painted on you by the enemy. He doesn't want you hearing any sort of message tonight that would be applicable to your life in a powerful and spiritual way. Okay. He'd rather your attention be off and your ears be filled with something else than what we're going to bring tonight. So I just would encourage you to lean in for that reason alone. The enemy doesn't want you to hear this. Then you know you got to hear it. Then you know it's something that will benefit your life. So Michelle, thanks for having me on here tonight. Yeah. And I look forward to hearing what the other gals have to say too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. And you're right. That is this is the place that Satan would not want you to be. So thanks for coming tonight, youth and adults. Next, I want Chrissy to introduce herself. So Chrissy, if you could share with us, please.
Yes, I'm very, very humbled and honored to be here tonight. My name's Chrissy Gillette, and aside from all the other titles and vocations that I have and life experiences, tonight I've just come to speak as a sinner who's been redeemed by Jesus Christ after having an abortion.
Thank you, Chrissy. So what I want to do is start off with a few questions. Now, all of the speakers tonight have been given a list of the questions in advance so they could kind of peruse them. I told them I wasn't necessarily going to follow the order I gave them. So, and we won't call on everybody, but if we miss something, or if there's something you want to ask, jot it down so that we can include that later today or tonight. So the very first question I have, and I'd really like, I think, Amy to start with this one. What struggles or challenges have you experienced in relation to the life issue you face? So in relation to depression, what sort of struggles or challenges have you faced?
I think the topic and the struggle with depression is pervasive. So when you ask, like, what area of my life has it affected, or what is the greatest struggle, it's that it's permeating. It permeates the way that you view reality, the way that you process reality. It is an overall moment by moment life living experience that I've said before, like in moments when I should have been happy, there was like always a cloud that was taking from that. Something was off. And I realized that even when I was a teenager, there were moments that should have been challenging, but were more so. They were debilitating, they were paralyzing. And I'm like, what is that? And before you understand what you have and how it works in your life, there's a tendency to just think you're lazy, you're dysfunctional, you're selfish, because it looks as though you're, kind of self-protecting or making choices that just have to do with yourself. So the issues and the challenges that I face were, how do I even engage life with my giftings? If I don't know from one moment to the next what I'm going to be feeling and how that's going to affect me in that moment, how can I be present? And some of you have probably experienced that, like you want to be emotionally present for the other people in your life, and you know that you should be, and yet for some reason you've got this drawback into yourself and a sense of anxiety and fear that you're wrestling with and you don't know how to. So that was really, this has really been an all-encompassing thing for me in struggling. And I would say that's my number one battle, has been, how do I be present for the people that I love and I care about, and be fully there in those moments emotionally that I want to be for other people in my life. That's been my greatest hurdle.
Yeah, certainly through our, all the areas of our vocations, that's, we know we're called to serve, right? And it's hard when we're facing something that's inhibiting that. So yeah.
Right.
Pat, I'm going to pose the same question to you. What struggles or challenges have you experienced? And Carl can jump in if he'd like as well, in relation to the life issue that you've faced.
Okay. Well, I would say that my greatest struggle started back really when he was born. It's so difficult to separate the path of journey that we've been on from the fact that when he entered our lives greatly changed. And I think that my greatest struggle has been debating with God about, is this really your plan, God, for me? Because when Carl was born, we didn't believe that at all. We had two typical children at the time, and I was pregnant at an age where, looking back on it, you're very vulnerable, so to speak, to have a child with Down syndrome, but I never really thought about it. But our doctor encouraged me to have an amniocentesis, which back then in 1981 was sort of the standard. Now it's a simple blood test, but back then it was to have an amnio. So I did. I went in and they attempted to do an amnio 3 times and never could get the fluid. And he told me to come back and another month and I'd be further along, and I did that. And they tried the amnio again. And finally the doctors in Houston said, this doesn't happen. We don't know what's, nothing is really wrong, but you're really running a greater risk of having something go wrong with carrying the pregnancy than you are of having really anything go wrong with the baby. They said I had a 1 in 365 chance of having something wrong with the baby. So don't mess with yourself, was what the doctor said. So I thought I agreed with that. And I went home and didn't even think any more about it until at 34 weeks, my water broke and Carl was eventually born, very premature, only 2.5 pounds. And right away they suspected his Down syndrome. And the doctor came to me in the recovery room and said, "We believe you have a baby with Down syndrome." And I said, "Oh no, you must be wrong. You must have mixed the babies up in the nursery. There's no way I could have a child with Down syndrome." And I listed off all these reasons, all the way to the point that I had a 1/4 of an acre in organic vegetables. The silly thing that your mind goes to at the time of denial or the time of debating with God. And even our pastor at the time came over because I was a couple hours away. And he prayed that God would take this very premature baby to be with him, because we didn't think this was God's plan for us. We had all these reasons that it couldn't be. However, God was orchestrating behind the scenes something that you couldn't miss. And that was that we wanted this baby to be baptized because he may not have lived through the night or not. And so my husband, who was an attorney at the time, went down the street in Austin, Texas, to find a pastor who would come and baptize the baby in case he would die from being only 2.5 pounds. So this pastor baptized the baby, and I was out with a sleeping pill, so I never even knew this. But he baptized Carl, and my husband said, well, you know, this is really a double tragedy. You know, not only is he very premature and may not live through the night, but they think he has Down syndrome. And that pastor, Pastor Tom Peterson of Austin, Texas, said, we have a child with Down syndrome, and she is the delight of our life. And so all that night, I say, my attorney husband and Pastor Peterson got their theology straight, so to speak. Well, I knew nothing of this. So the next morning, when I woke up after the sleeping pill, a woman was at the foot of my bed, and she identified herself as the wife of the pastor who had baptized Carl. And she said, and these were her words, she said, I'm here to tell you that God will show you more of his love through this child than you can ever imagine. And I wish I could have said, rah, rah, okay, I'm all set, God, I'm on board. Well, I was sort of a stiff-necked young mother at that point, and I wasn't so sure. But the years have gone by, and this child right here has, in fact, showed us more of God's love than we ever could have imagined. It hasn't been easy. There have been times when I still kind of debate with God. Are you sure, God, this is your plan for us? You know, and your plan of loving us too. It wasn't just his plan. It was a plan to show his love. And it was showing his love through something that we didn't want. We didn't expect. We didn't, you know, think we were qualified or any of that to do. But it was God showing us his love through this child. And not only us, but I want to say to the rest of the world too. And I think that Michelle, as his teacher back in elementary school, could vouch, so to speak, and all the way through all of the schools that he's been in, they have said, we have learned more of God's love through being educated side by side with this guy than in other ways.
Yes,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
That's my struggle, I guess I'll say, is really just sort of debating and questioning God initially, and sometimes along the way, whether what's happening to me is truly his best for me. And it is.
And that leads beautifully. You're absolutely right. Carl was certainly a gift during my first few years of teaching, and a gift of joy and blessing, and a reminder of Christ's work in our lives. And that leads beautifully into our next question, which is, how has this issue then strengthened or challenged your faith? And I'm going to let you start, Pat, and then I'm going to go back to Amy, and then the next question is Chrissy's. So go ahead.
Okay. I think it strengthened my faith because he gave me a story, and he impressed on me there's no way I can keep it quiet. The dynamics of the story of Carl's birth are something that only God orchestrated. And it didn't happen by circumstance. It didn't just happen. It was God behind the scenes bringing that pastor to us where we didn't know him, and he had a child with Down syndrome. And then bringing his wife, who went out on a limb and said some very prophetic words, so to speak, but those words just burned into my heart and were the words, or are the words, that have kept me through a lot of really trying times with raising Carl. So I think that I found tremendous meaning being able to tell the story. I was equipped as a young high school and college student, being able to major in public speaking and debate. So I look now and I look back and I see how God was equipping me back then to have no fear of telling this story in front of people, And he's given me audiences to be able to. So I'm so thankful for that, because it's given tremendous meaning to my life.
All right. How about you, Amy? If you could go ahead and share with us, how has the issue strengthened or challenged your faith as well?
It is, Michelle, it's my greatest need. It is my absolute greatest area of need. And what it's done for me in my lifetime, when you realize that you are not okay on your own, that you're walking a path that you don't have the answers to. And there comes a moment in time where you realize that the strength and the answers and the ability to live a productive life and a healthy life is not going to come from within yourself, because something is broken, something's missing, and you realize you can't replace it. And then the second realization, and I'm really going to throw this out to the youth that are listening tonight, is oftentimes when you realize that you are not the source of your healing or your ability to be okay, the next logical step is, well, then who around me is going to cause me to be okay? And I can save you a lot of time by simply saying that answer also does not come from other people. So how has this equipped me, and where's the really incredible blessing in my life? Even though I would not have chosen this in my life, it has drawn me to the feet of the cross, right? To the foot of the cross and to the feet of Christ, knowing that I am going to need to walk this life day by day, moment by moment, in partnership with him, because he is my strength. And when I realize my own mind and my own psyche and my own abilities are not going to bring me to a place of healthy functioning, that's going to have to come by the hand of God in order to make sense of my life. Okay.
Absolutely.
So when I talk about a need for Christ, I mean a felt need for his presence and his affirmation of what I'm for, and his affirmation that I can even do what I'm for in this life journey. It has driven me into the arms of Christ unapologetically and very boldly, because that is where my healing or my health, my mental health, is grounded. He is my anchor. And for that, I will not regret it. Absolutely. I won't regret this part of my life, because it has caused me to walk with him moment by moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a powerful confession. And it leads again into our next questions. And that's for Chrissy. And I'd like to know, where do you find strength and meaning as you contemplate the life issue that you have faced, as you contemplate having had an abortion?
I would say that I find strength and meaning in the word, the ultimate authority, and really the only objective truth. That for me, this distilled message of scripture is about life, love, and relationships that play vital roles in all aspects of life. For me, there's purpose in life that's been created by the Father, redeemed by the Son, and called by the Holy Spirit, where I am serving God and serving my neighbors, reflecting that love. And yet there's also knowing that God is in control of all things, the blessings and the sufferings, and that has strengthened me to face other issues in life since then. So I'd say that's my strength and meaning.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because today was a big day, right? Normally we would be in Washington, D.C. today, and we would be taking part in the March for Life. And so on this day, when we remember the unborn, and especially those who have been put to death in the womb, Chrissy, how does your experience testify to the sanctity of life? And I'm going to ask Pat and Carl to answer this question too after you're done. So, but I'm going to let you start.
Okay. I would say that at the time of my abortion, I did not know the sanctity of life. In fact, I didn't think that my life had any value. And so no life that was within me had value. And yet almost immediately after I murdered my daughter, I realized that her life had tremendous value. And I was overwhelmed by guilt and shame by what I had done. And later in life, when I became a Christian, I learned the Lord is our creator of life, the redeemer of life, and that Jesus suffered and died for all sins, including my sin of abortion. And I'm responsible for my daughter's death. I deserve to die as a result, not Jesus. And yet his unconditional love, and I still really don't fully understand it, but in response to his great love and his salvation of me, I spend the rest of my life proclaiming that sanctity and value of all human life.
Yeah. And what a testimony that, you know, you can say that you realized what you had done was worth mourning over even before knowing Christ. You know, that conscience within us, and what a joy to know him and to know that forgiveness, you know, even now. So I want to pass that same question on to Pat and Carl as well. Again, as on this day when we remember the unborn, in some countries today, there is much rejoicing and much boasting about the fact that Down syndrome is no longer part of their community. And the way that they're solving that life issue is through the use of abortion. And so I guess I would appreciate your comments on this as well.
Well, I think it certainly saddens me to think that a country can legislate and wants to legislate an issue of genocide, because certainly what's happening in our country today and happening in the Netherlands and other countries in Europe, it is an issue of genocide. It's purposefully targeting a particular population with extermination. And it's no different than what Hitler was doing in Germany and in Europe back in the 40s. So as the abortion law approaches or is concerned with Down syndrome, we need to name the sin as it is, and it is genocide. Early on, when I was pregnant with Carl, I don't think that I certainly wasn't adamantly pro-life. I don't think I was pro-abortion, but I don't think I really had much clarity in the whole issue. And that's probably why I went ahead and took the doctor's recommendation to at least find out what was, how the pregnancy was, because obviously the doctor was suggesting that we know whether you're dealing with a baby with Down syndrome or not. I didn't really know that at the time, but I certainly saw how God's hand was protecting the pregnancy and not allowing me to even have to grapple with the decision. In somewhat times, I think I'm sad that God couldn't have trusted me or entrusted me with the decision to keep the pregnancy going. But today, all women, all young girls are faced with that question of whether to keep a pregnancy going on. And now we can tell ahead of time so many different situations that doctors would see or our society would see as defects. And therefore the question of keeping that pregnancy or having an abortion is within our reach to make that decision. I think one thing that's really important that in the Down syndrome community and advocacy that I work in is getting true information out to doctors to be able to counsel young pregnant women about the reality of raising a child with Down syndrome, because new and good current information is so different than what the information that could well be the common knowledge of people about Down syndrome. And I think also a key visual in that statistic or that information is that there continues to be a waiting list to adopt babies with Down syndrome. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that some people truly understand the joy of raising a child with Down syndrome. It's not the burden of raising a child with Down syndrome, but it's making a choice to experience the joys that prospective adoptive parent knows from good information from other parents, such as ourselves, who can speak to the unspeakable joy of having a child with Down syndrome in their family. So that little statistic right there, that there's a waiting list to adopt babies with Down syndrome, is a powerful message to go against the eugenics movement or the euthanasia movement or the movement in other countries to exterminate people with Down syndrome.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a fact I didn't know. Now, Carl, your mom just told us that you are a great joy to her. Would you say the same about your mom?
Yeah.
Is she a great joy to you?
Am I a great joy to you?
In the hospital,
The what?
the hospital,
The hospital? What about the hospital?
the
I told the story about when you were in the hospital? Yeah.
you.
When I was in the hospital?
Yeah, the
Oh, that's right. We recently had a car accident, and
Oh,
Carl was in
no.
the car with me. And we weren't hurt, but I did have to go to the hospital, and it was very traumatic. So that's what you're thinking about. But Michelle is asking you the question: how do you look at life here, and look at life with mom and dad and Eric and Kimberly, and what do you think about that? It's great, huh? Are you glad that you were born?
Yeah.
Do you like having Down syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about Down syndrome? Well, it's just the way you are, right?
Yeah.
And who made you that way?
Yeah.
Jesus. He made you that way. That's right. And he made you that way because of what, do you think? Because he loves you. That's right. He made you that special way because he loves you and he loves us to put you in our family. Right?
Yes, that's right. And in all of our lives. So what I want to do next is talk about those special gifts then. What special gifts has God given each of you? And I'm going to have each of you speak on this to serve others. So let's start with Amy. Amy, do you want to go ahead and start?
Absolutely. Sure. What has having this depression, anxiety component as a part of my life, how has that equipped me to jump in, right, with other people? And that's really the greatest joy that I would say that's come out of it. And I want to bring this as a word of hope to those of you who know that you might have this as a part of your wiring, is it has made me comfortable with brokenness. All right. And I would say, even to go a step further than that, it has made me drawn to it in other people. When I was a little girl, before I ever heard the word depression, or I should say the first couple times that I heard it, I was afraid of it. I was like, oh, that person, like I had an aversion to what I did not understand. All right. And if you have an area of your life, and in mine, this is depression, where God allows you to know that you're broken and then reassures you that he's going to use that area of your life with great purpose, which is what he's done for me. He's given me a platform to reach out to other people because they know that, first of all, they know I'm not perfect, which makes you much more approachable. Let's be honest. When was the last time that you were inspired or really drawn to absolute perfection in another person? Okay. That story is intimidating, and honestly, it can be really off-putting when somebody hasn't suffered yet, and they kind of give off this aura of everything's great, it's always great, I'm great, right? But it's my area of brokenness that caused people to be way more comfortable with me and ready to allow me or invite me to come into their area of brokenness too, because I'm not going to judge. And it's not weird to me, and it's not off-putting. I don't have an aversion to it. Now, I want to say beyond that, I've also seen that in my kids who have grown up with me having an honest conversation with them about this part of my life. There's moments that I have to say to my kids, you know what, guys, I'm not okay right now. Mom's not okay, but I'm going to be okay.
Right.
Because this whole thing cycles. It's not every single moment of my life. There's moments where I'm really genuinely not okay. But what I've noticed is my boys now, having grown up with this open, don't be afraid of it approach, just accept it as a part of who you are and something that God is going to work through in your life. They will now, when we go into a hospital setting, we're living in a community with a huge percentage of homeless people. And we have huge homeless shelters that are right by us that literally house hundreds of people at night. And my boys are so quick to be like, can I get out of the car? Can I take a water bottle? Can I, do we have anything in the car? Do we have gloves in the car as we're going by a corner? It's everywhere around us, and they are not afraid to engage it and to enter in. And it's with people that are suffering, that are unseen. And what my disability has allowed me to do is, or equipped me to do, is to flat out see people. Guys, broken people are on my radar all the time. And I'm like, God, how can I do that? What can I do there? And one of the most unique situations that I've encountered that I want to share with you is that a year ago here, I mentioned to you that I have 2 little foster kids that are living in my home right now. Well, what that looked like at the beginning a year ago was I took in a homeless mom. All right. She was pregnant and had a little baby, and they were evicted from a shelter near us. And you guys, I took her into my house. Now, that's not a pat on the back. That's a lifetime of being familiar with what it is to suffer in some way that makes me see and engage those that are suffering and not be afraid of it. I was not afraid of her. Okay, whether or not there were mental health issues or other issues, I was like, you know what, we're going to tackle that. With God's help, he arranged it. And track this for just a moment. This young mom, we moved her into our home on a Monday night, found out Monday morning she was evicted, made the decision to move her in that night with her little 1-year-old boy. And the next day, a month early, her water broke.
Yeah.
2 days after moving her in, I was in the delivery room. Okay. And now that little peanut, that little precious girly has been with me for a year. Now, this is a 5-boy mom. I want you to remember that. Okay. And he's allowed me the experience of having pink stuff everywhere in my life. Okay. And it wasn't something that I even thought I needed to experience. I told you I love being a boy mom, but God, through this part of my life and my willingness to see the broken and engage the broken, is blessing me in ways that I haven't even asked for. I haven't even known to ask for. Okay. So again, I remember, I'll just say this, whatever it is that you're struggling with, there was a moment in my life where the original story the way that I thought this was going to go, when I first really looked depression in the face, which was probably in my late 20s, was I'm not okay. Now I know what it's called. God's going to fix it. What a great story. All right. That's really the way I thought this was going to go down. But there will come a moment for some of you that you realize, you know what, whatever it is that you're struggling with, there are moments that God says, this is going to be your thorn. This is going to be your thorn. And you can run the other way as hard as you try. You're going to end up right back there facing whatever it is that thorn is, that's a part of your life, be it anxiety or depression, or be it something completely different, be it addiction, something completely different than what I'm experiencing. But what I asked of God when I realized that it wasn't, at least at that time, it wasn't his plan to lift it from my life, that he was going to allow it and not remove it immediately. And what I asked him was, Lord, don't waste it. If this is going to be a part of my story, please don't waste it. And to this day, right now in this moment, right, it's something that he is using to bring value to the lives of other people. He is using it to get his story and his message across in a different way. I can tell you that he has been faithful through the course of 2 decades of my life or more here to not waste this. And so that is absolutely my prayer. And I'd encourage you to pray the same. Lord, whatever this is, this thorn in my flesh, this brokenness, please don't let it be wasted, and not a moment will be wasted.
Yeah, thank you for that. You're right. There are lifelong suffering. There's instances of lifelong suffering that we learn to deal with, and if God can use it to his glory, and he most certainly can, then that is what we want, right? And so I'm going to pass it on to Chrissy now. And Amy kind of answered that question and the next one. So Chrissy, you know, do you want to tell us what special gifts or how that God has given you to serve others, or how has going through this life issue changed your perspective on suffering? How has it enabled you to minister to those who are suffering?
Well, I think initially I had the same worldview about suffering that many people believe, that I thought I was in control of my suffering, and that I believed that my suffering resulted from my bad choices. And that if I wanted my suffering to end, I needed to make better choices. But that's not how it works. After recovering from an abortion, I learned that suffering is not as clear cut as something that's good or bad, but that it's a tool that God uses, and he uses it to reveal what sin is, right? That abortion is a sin. That in that way also, I think that it is a gift that I've learned that suffering teaches us to look to Christ on the cross, that it keeps me dependent on the Lord daily, like the thorn in the flesh that Amy's talking about. The suffering keeps me dependent on the Lord. And I've learned to embrace it as a part of the ministry work that I do. So in that way, suffering is a gift, right? It's a gift, a special gift that when I do acts of mercy, which are times that I willingly suffer alongside my neighbor, and the Lord will work in and through me to reveal his love to others. And in that, I have a compassion for people and the ability to relate on the level of just humanity. And that I like to think that maybe Jesus, when he was walking the earth, and even though he sometimes was frustrated with our inability to get it, or our lack of faith, but he still was so endeared to people in their humanity. And I think that in that way, when people are vulnerable and most honest with their sinful nature, it just endears me to them, and I can't help but love them. And oftentimes those people are the ones who believe they're unlovable, or who have been told they're unlovable. And so that's how I serve them, and just be the water hose that God works through. It's sharing his life-giving water and the love that comes with it.
Yeah, I think you nailed it in the head, in the sense that when we suffer, that gives us a commonality with others, and an opportunity to share that grace that has been shared with us, and that encouragement. And I want to jump to Pat now, because I think this idea of suffering and also ties in with the hope that we have to offer through our life experiences. I know, Pat, you have done so in a variety of ways, even in the hospital setting. I know from my discussions with you in the past in Fort Wayne, and I don't know if you're still continuing that. How do you offer hope to those who may be experiencing a pregnancy, or who have a surprise delivery of a child with Down syndrome? If you could maybe share with us, that would be wonderful.
Yes. Well, certainly through the process of shock and acceptance of a different plan for your life, I think there came a point where I was ready for advocacy. And I think I moved through the grief of having a child that I didn't want to be that way, to the point of recognizing that this not only was God's plan for me, but also that, kind of like what Amy said too, God has given me a platform to be able to help others. And you can do that individually, through your vocations, but you can also do it from a platform of support groups. And Down syndrome support groups have been very important in my life through the course of Carl's life. And one of the parts of support group, so to speak, for Down syndrome has been education, and getting true and factual education out. So, for example, when we did live in Fort Wayne, our organization, our Down syndrome organization, did go to hospitals. We had a new mother packet, and we had brochures and factual information to be able to give out, and of course our names and our numbers to come join us when that parent might be ready. And most important, we gave a face to what Down syndrome really is like to new parents, because at first it's so overwhelming. You just can't imagine what, is this a death sentence for my family? Are my other kids going to, resent the time it's going to take? Is my husband going to, be, because I'm so preoccupied with this child as a woman, or vice versa. So I think there are a lot of fears and unknowns that new mothers face, that we hope to dispel some of that by these packets of information. We also work with nurses, because nurses in the prenatal or in the neonatal or the natal units of hospitals are the first line for new mothers to learn how to, breastfeed a baby, or how to change a diaper, or whatever. And so they can be the very first one to give not only good information, but also hope. And in my circumstance, when I was floundering around after Carl was born in the hospital, and granted, you only have 1 or 2 days in the hospital nowadays, but I remember a nurse, her name was Esther, actually. And she just looked at me in the eye and she said, just take this baby home and love him. And I'll never forget that. She didn't give me, 20,000 do and don't and facts or anything like that. She just gave me that heartfelt, mother to mother kind of advice. Just take him home and love him. And I can't tell you how that revolutionized my look at this child, or this baby that, granted, it took a while to come around to, but the more I recognize the value of mothers reaching other mothers, or parents reaching other parents, in whatever life struggle. Certainly, Amy, I'm sure you could, and Chrissy too, talk to the benefit of not only being vulnerable and open about what your life experience has been, but also joining with other people who are experiencing the same life issue, and to be able to have that platform to give hope to other people.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time, and there are lots more questions to ask on my list. I'm going to narrow it down to 2 though. And that way, hopefully, we will have some time for our students to ask questions and other guests. But the last 2, I would love for you guys to jump in on and answer in all cases. Okay, so jump in when you're ready. My first question is, how do Christians address life issues like yours differently than the world does? And if that isn't different, how should it be? And I think we'll start there, and then I'll ask my last one in a moment. So Pat, you're on the screen right now. If you want to begin, feel free. But
Yes.
if you want some think time, go ahead.
No, I think that sadly, I'm going to say I don't have the actual statistic, but sadly, I will say that Christians probably are aborting babies with Down syndrome or spina bifida or significant what are called birth defects, probably at the same rate that non-Christians are. And that's certainly a reflection, unfortunately, of the impact of our culture, because our culture says that these are throwaway babies, they are throwaway kids. And forget it. I mean, we were given the best medical advice at the time of Carl's birth to put him in an institution, to forget about him, and to go on and have another child. And that was the message of our society, that this child is dispensable. He's dispensable. Now, God had a different plan, and he certainly knocked us over the head and said, no, this child is indispensable to you. And I'm going to teach you that through his life. But the culture sends both to our Christian people, mothers or women and men, and to the non-Christians that, no, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. If it doesn't really work into your game plan, get rid of it. And that's a very tragic outlook on life, because we know it's hollow, and it certainly is not God-pleasing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are seen as dispensable in many cases, and our whole theme for today and for this week is that indispensability. And so thank you for bringing that up. And for, yeah, you know, statistics do show that Christians do have many abortions, and the pressure is certainly on. I remember that pressure myself when, you know, we were asked whether or not we wanted to have the tests done to find out if our child had Down syndrome. And we made very clear to the doctor, it doesn't matter either way. But the implied, or the implication is, there is something to be done if a Down syndrome test comes back positive. So thank you. Chrissy or Pam, not Pam, Amy, sorry. Who would like to go next? Amy, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd love to get in on this one.
Yeah, go.
How does the world and the church handle this topic differently? Okay, there's a message out there today. You will not have missed it. You've heard it if you're on social media, and even if you're not. But that message is, you are enough. All right, my friend, you are enough. Now, at face value, if it's saying similar to what we're saying here tonight is you are indispensable, there's some truth in that. Okay, there's something in that we're drawn to, that we're like, yeah, I think I am. But I will tell you this, when it comes to areas of brokenness in your life, and for me, that is this depression, anxiety component. If I thought the answer was in and of myself, I'd be lost. Friends, I wouldn't have made it this far. Because I'll tell you what, you can probably tell from my speaking that I have a pretty strong, assertive personality. It can be kind of out there, okay? And there's a lot of joy in my life. The enemy has not been able to take that away through this component. God has protected that and multiplied it even through the experiences that I've had. But what I have learned is that's not coming from me. It is not coming from Amy Skogerboe. And anything that you glean from anything that I say, I'm not the source of that. And that's really, you're not seeing my life be joyful and healthy because I'm a strong person. No, what you're seeing is a broken person who relies fully on the Lord and has identified where the source of my strength and my wellness comes from. So when the world says it comes from you, I say step one in the whole process, no matter what it is that you struggle with, is identifying that no, the source of your strength is not you. The world has it wrong, because you will come to the end of yourself way more quickly than you would hope. And that's not a bad place to be, because it's at that point that you come to the end of yourself that you realize that you're not the answer. Friends, that is a huge relief, because you've got an all perfect, all powerful God, and he is the answer. So the world says you, and the church and the Bible and God say, no, it's Christ. Christ is your answer. So if you're struggling from depression and anxiety, rather than follow the path of the world, which is self-help, get the books, get all that stuff, or God being your source of being what's okay, identify that really quickly, make that concrete decision quickly, that this is a matter of faith to begin with, that you, and then get educated. Okay. And I'm not saying don't get help, because I needed it. You know, and there's a stigma that goes along with seeking medical help for depression. And that will be, and I'm sorry, but this is often a message that comes from the church, is what you've got here is a lack of faith, a lack of prayer. And in some very mild circumstances, I will say, if you're not walking in the faith and you're not as a habit, getting into prayer and being in the word with God, you can get blue and you can get funky and you can get a form of depression that I would say is circumstantial. And that's real too. You can be down about the things that are going on in your life. That's not what I'm addressing in this moment. I'm addressing a deeper physiological depression issue that is physically a part of who you are. Either way, allow God to show you how to get help for that, and don't be afraid to get help for that. Go do what you need to do. If medication is a part of that, do what you need to do to get well, and pray those people into your life, those doctors, those mentors, those therapists, those counselors that know what they're talking about, and that also know the source is Jesus Christ. The source of their knowledge is also the Lord. So that is that's my difference in how the world deals with this and how I deal with this as a believer. I flat out know that the answer is not myself. It is not me who is worthy. It is Christ who is worthy. Okay. And that anything that he chooses to do in me, just praise God.
Yep.
Praise God. It won't be my name that is known because of this. It better be the Lord's name that is lifted high.
Yeah.
And I want to say something too, Michelle, just very quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
When Pat was talking about the waiting list for families that are looking for babies with Down syndrome, I have a very good friend who's on that list. So that's very personal for me. And just a vote of amen and hallelujah, that is actually definitely happening. And this friend of mine has 5 kids, and her oldest daughter was born with Down syndrome, and they are looking to adopt a baby. They want another Down syndrome baby in their family. They know the value of it, the joy of it. And that is one thing that I say, if your family is not able to be on the front lines adopting, then find those families and champion them.
Yes.
Because you're absolutely right. They have identified the indispensable quality of a life with Down syndrome. And I think that's fantastic. So there we go.
Well, thank you for that. Chrissy, how about you?
Yeah, the difference between the world and the church. The world offers abortion as a solution to unplanned pregnancy. And while after the abortion, it's true, I was no longer pregnant, but the world didn't tell me about the consequences of abortion. And it didn't offer me any support afterwards either. In fact, I felt the pressure to remain silent, like my abortion was a part of a dark past that should remain secret. And the world, where at first it was permissible and promoting abortion, afterwards has a tendency to be punitive in the decision, right? There's not a legal punishment, but there is a punishment about how could you be a person who would do that. But Christians speak the truth about abortion, both what it really is as murdering and killing an unborn life, but it also speaks highly of the value of unborn life. And many Christians offer options for helping those in a pregnancy situation that they weren't prepared for. And the church offers forgiveness after the fact that the world does not offer. And so instead of being accused, as the world and Satan does, the accuser, instead the church offers a place of forgiveness and love. And the church speaks the truth about my identity as who I am and whose I am as a child of God.
Yeah, and that is so important. And actually, it connects right to my last question, and that is, you know, and Amy mentioned some of it as well. And it's not even on your sheets, ladies, so I apologize. This is off the cuff. But will you? It is very likely that the youth that are watching, that some of the youth that are watching are dealing with a life issue even now. And whether they have, you know, openly admitted to that or not, and if not, they will someday. What final word of hope do you have for them about their indispensability, despite and maybe because of the suffering that they are experiencing, or the life issue they are experiencing? So I hate to put someone on the spot first, but Chrissy, you're on screen. So are you willing to go first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Well, I would say that related to the life issue that I'm speaking about today, anyone faced with an unplanned pregnancy or considering the option of abortion, knowing that the world lies, right, by promising it as a solution to problems, but it's not. Abortion steals the blessing and gift of life. It kills the child, but it also kills a part of myself. And it leaves behind a wake of pain and suffering like no other that I can really explain or give words to. But if in the past you participated in a decision that led to an abortion, the important thing to know is that there is hope, that there is healing, and there is peace through the Lord and his word. There is a life eternal, and that God uses what was meant to destroy for good and glory and the benefit of life all around.
Absolutely. Pat or Amy, who wants to go next? Go ahead, Pat.
I'm just looking real quick in my Bible, because what came to my mind was in 1 John 4, greater is he who is in you or in me than he who's in the world. And that we have the greater good, so to speak, in us, because we have the Holy Spirit and we have been given the mind of Christ, and we have that forever. And that's greater than Satan is in the world, who wants to continually tell us that, oh, you're the greatest, or do what you want, or do it if it feels good, or get rid of it if it doesn't feel good, whatever the message that the world is giving. For us to be able to stand firm is to know that greater is Jesus in us than Satan is in the world. And I think that that's one thing that I often cling to when I do feel very weak and the world feels very strong and it's pushing so hard against me. And I think for young people especially, the world is a strong pressure. I mean, they're being bombarded with all the technology that is continually shaping, trying to shape our minds. And so it's God's word and putting God's word in our minds that helps us withstand that message. And I think it's, again, that remembering those verses, whatever they are, that remind you that greater is Jesus and greater is God than Satan in the world.
Now remember this, because tomorrow we're going to reference that, okay? Saturday morning. Remember this. All right, thank you very much. And Amy.
What I would love to say as far as a word of hope is own what God is doing in and through your life. It's really easy to own your strengths and your areas where you don't struggle. And we find pride in that, I think. Well, I know we do. But have you owned the parts of your life, whether it be a divorce, maybe in your family, or some of you maybe have adoption loss as a part of your story, addiction in some way, or the addiction of a parent or somebody that's close to you? Whatever struggle it is that you faced, or whatever brokenness you've been able to identify so far, or might identify sometime in your future, be at peace with the fact that God has allowed it and is going to use it in your life if you surrender it to him. I believe a lot of believers, when we have something that goes off script, okay, in our life, something we feel like, well, that wasn't a part of my plan, that we fight it. We can fight the fact that that exists in our lives because we simply rebel against it and don't want it to be a part of our story. And you can waste a whole lot of time, my friends, in fighting being broken. And yet God, in his miraculous goodness and grace, is waiting to tell an incredible story. And he uses broken vessels beautifully and powerfully when he reassembles them. If you've ever seen a mosaic, that's a beautiful analogy of what God can do with broken vessels reassembled into something just incredibly beautiful. And he has for you a very specific purpose so that that is not wasted in your life. Face it, own it, surrender it. Whatever it is, surrender it to God's purposes and watch what he will do through that unexpected and maybe that unwanted part of your story and part of your life. I heard, and I'll end on this, you've heard of women of faith, okay? And I remember probably 10, 15, no, it was more than that. It was probably about 20 years ago that I was listening to women of faith, and these gals would get up and speak and just pour out the goodness of God. And I was like, where in the world do these gals come from that can speak like that and are so in love with the Lord and have clearly spent time with him? And then they would start to tell their stories. And you guys, there was incredible brokenness there. Some with diagnosis, of cancers and things. They had, one gal had lost multiple children. A couple of her sons had died almost a year apart on the same date or something. There were just these things that were, and one of the gals dealt with depression. And that was the first time I heard a believer speak openly about it and the fact that she was medicated and would be. And it was fascinating to me. But what I learned through that was these gals are broken vessels to a person. They've gone into the valley, and they didn't just skim across the top of the mountains. They went into the valley with the Lord, and that is sacred territory. And he did things in them that now he can do things through them. And they surrendered in the valley so that they could be used, and that they would have some of those mountaintop experiences being used as a broken vessel. And that is, that's a partnership with the Lord. There is no better way to live. And I would argue that a broken life partnered with God and being used purposefully is a much better experience than a perfect life that doesn't see suffering and doesn't see it in the world around them and kind of is complacent and doesn't really care. Okay, perfection breeds apathy in some ways. If you haven't ever suffered, you can become really apathetic and complacent. I don't have that luxury. Because of my suffering, I'm driven into a deeper life experience, and I pray that for you too, that God would use it. That is a powerful word of hope in the way that he will use this in your life. And there will be joy along with the suffering. There will be joy, but you're going to live a deep, real partnership with God, and there's nothing else like it. Michelle, thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do want to, before we leave, and I know that our hour, I try to promise not to go over an hour, and we maybe have hit the hour and 5 or hour and 10. So I understand if people want to leave, please feel free to do that. Just one quick comment. Our last 2 sessions will be tomorrow morning. We start at 9 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Central. I'm sorry, on a Saturday morning, but we were all going to be in Washington, D.C. So we were all going to start later, but so I hope that you can join us then. We will have 2 presentations, one by Pastor Hans Feeney, who will be talking about our topic, You Are Indispensable, and that's you as in we're sharing that with the world. And then I'm going to give you some just practical ways maybe to do that, or at least to start the discussion with someone on life issues. So please do come back for that. And I'm going to go ahead and, if you need to leave, feel free. If our speakers are able to stay and people want to ask questions, this would be the time to do it. So if you do want to ask a question, if you can just hit your hand, raise your hand, or type it in the chat, and I will facilitate that. But again, thank you so much for joining us for our second session of Y for Life in Washington, D.C. So again, if there are any questions, feel free to jump in. Lauren has a question. Go ahead.
I have a question for Amy. I'm a teacher at a Lutheran high school, and it seems like the instances of anxiety among the teenagers has increased in the last several years, and probably especially now with the crazy year we've had. We're in person, thankfully. We've been for most of the year, but obviously still that's a struggle. So just wondered if you have any wisdom, advice, things for a teacher to help our students who, we don't necessarily get to have, huge, long, deep conversations, but just in the little everyday interactions, we do get to have. I don't know how to help them. Do you have any ideas?
First of all, thanks, Lauren, for that question. I was in the education system in a Christian high school, or I was actually in the elementary part of it. but worked with the junior high students as well, and for 17 years. So I'm kind of from your world, so to speak. And along the areas of anxiety, what I would encourage you to do is, first of all, for you to be in conversation with a therapist would be really smart. All teachers right now should be. Like I said, my husband's a pastor. Getting information on how to deal or how to actually decompress some of that anxiety in the lives of the students that you're working with. Get some professional tools from a therapist, or maybe even consider doing a Zoom call with a therapist that bring this to light, that can just talk about, hey, do you know how many teenagers are struggling with an anxiety? And then you throw COVID into it, and that pretty much, that's everybody now. At that point, that we're kind of all there, including parents. And it's really honest for you as an adult to be able to say, I don't have all of this, so I want to bring in somebody that actually does this. Find yourself a Christian therapist that can open the conversation. Because what I found, especially with working with 7th and 8th graders, I had the privilege of teaching a life and leadership class. And I had these adults coming in, and one of them talked about death, all right, to my 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And afterwards, the students responded privately by writing out some thoughts. And I can't tell you how many kids said, we never talk about this stuff out loud. We never talk about this stuff out loud. And some of them had even been present when somebody had died, a grandparent or something. One had lost a sibling, and they're like, nobody ever talks out loud about it, because it's almost so if we don't talk about it, it's maybe not real, or, you know. So I would say give them permission, Lauren, give them permission to acknowledge it and bring some wisdom to it from a therapist that knows how to really speak to it at this age. But bring it to light, because we all know that in the darkness, there's a different kind of a hold that can take place. But when you bring things to light, there's freedom. So speak it out loud. Speak it out loud. So many people avoid it. I remember the first time I heard somebody in a church setting, my church setting, talk about depression. It was like a boulder lifted off my shoulders. I was like, oh my goodness, somebody is saying this stuff out loud, and these are my people. So you have a chance right now to be their people and to say the stuff out loud. Go for it.
Thank you.
Great question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, for the youth that are here, just show of hands, how many of you think this would be like, have each one of these speakers come and speak a full Chats for Life session? This would be a good idea. Yeah. Okay. I was thinking the same thing. All right. We're on the same wavelength. All right. So I do want to thank our guest presenters one final time. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Amy, very much for coming and sharing with us some very personal and hopeful responses to life issues that you have faced. You have been a great blessing this evening to all of us, and I personally thank you for your testimony to us and for your encouraging words. So that's all for tonight. Again, I hope to see many of you tomorrow morning. God's blessings, and have a great night.